Good evening, everyone. This evening, it's Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good evening. Let the record reflect Commissioners Sobroff, Bonner, Decker, and Figueroa Villa are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay. Welcome to Exposition Park. Welcome to Expo Center. Exposition Park has been a historic part of Los Angeles for many, many years. As we know, the Coliseum was the home to the 1932, 1984, and then also 2028 Olympic Games. The museums here are legendary. The Natural History Museum, the California Science Center, the African American Museum, the Space Shuttle Endeavour exhibit, and there are a lot of people who put a lot of time and a lot of their life into this wonderful community. One of them is here this evening, and she's been instrumental in this project, the Expo Center. This was the 1932 Olympic Swim Stadium that was red tagged and brought back by a public-private partnership as a community center for the citizens of Los Angeles, especially those in this community. A lot of people participate. Last year, over 1 million people were served free of charge in this facility. So I wanted to take a moment to introduce Belinda Jackson. Belinda has been the excitement and the pride of this project for many years, and probably knows, of the 1 million visits, probably knows 999,000 of them. Belinda, thank you.
Yes. Well, good evening and welcome to Expo Center, commissioners and guests. As Mr. Sobroff mentioned, this facility was built through a public and private partnership, and he did not say that Mr. Sobroff, is the chair of the Friends of Expo Center. We have, over 110,000 square feet of program space. So we are the largest recreational facility in the city and the county and the state of Los Angeles. This is the recreation center. It was the swim stadium for the 32 Olympics. This building is equipped with just about everything you can think of. 2 beautiful gyms. We have a commercial kitchen. We have a music studio, computer labs. We also have 2 beautiful pools. If you haven't looked out the window, please do. They've been renovated. We have all kinds of programs, kayaking, recreational swim. We have a free swim program, the Mayor's Swim LA program, along with a host of other programs. Along with that, we have a licensed preschool, and we do have an outdoor amphitheater, as well as the senior center was a lot of programs. We have some very active seniors. So we have a lot of a computer lab over there and a number of other rooms in that facility to serve our seniors. And we have the Sobroff Sports Field. Right now, we have probably the largest soccer program in the city. We have 950 kids in our soccer program. I'm sure on the way out, you're going to see them all on the field. So we're very, very proud to have this meeting. We've always had a partnership with LAPD, and we hope to continue that relationship. I do have some information at the desk out front there if you want to know more. This is a membership facility. However, it's free. So if you haven't taken one of our programs or our classes, especially I'm speaking to the audience, we have programs for everyone, and we welcome everyone. So you have a nice meeting, and hope to see you back here again.
Belinda, you've had a couple of one recent neighbor and one neighbor coming up.
That's right.
Your recent neighbor's Los Angeles Football Club.
That's right.
Been a great participant with us here.
Yes, they certainly have. And recently we just, Steve, you don't know this, we just partnered with the Lucas Museum and Narrative Arts Center, and we're doing a program with them now. So
Lucas
we're excited.
Museum is being built next door.
Right across the street. So this is a wonderful park, as Steve mentioned, with all the museums and all of that. So please take an opportunity, come back and visit us. Thank you very much.
Belinda, thanks for all you've done on behalf of everybody in Los Angeles. You're a shining star.
Thank you so very much.
Shining star. Okay, let's go to our consent calendar items. Do we have any comments on any of the consent agenda items?
I do have a question.
Sure.
I don't have any,
Dale, speak into the mic.
sure,
Yeah.
don't have any question or concern about any particular donation, but it did, since we're looking at the budget numbers and so on this year, it did kind of prompt me to ask whether, do we have any information really as to what level of donations in this we get on an annual basis and where those funds go? In other words, I see them kind of one-off, as individual consent items, but I'm just wondering whether we have any general sense on an annual basis. What's the ballpark sense?
We could have the Police Foundation, because a lot of the donations are made to or through the Police Foundation. They have an annual report. They give a report as to what, what they donate for, I think, and in specifics. But I think the number's probably in the $3 million range from the Police Foundation, $2 million range a year.
And there are some other sources as well, right, in terms of the Dodgers and some other sources we see here pretty regularly?
There are.
Yeah, okay.
There are.
So maybe I'll just ask Richard, someone that would be helpful to be able to figure out how we
Yeah,
could
we'll
get
you
a
copy
snapshot
of the
look at
report,
that.
too.
Sure, we can put a report on the agenda for,
Sure.
give us a couple weeks to gather the information.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
no, understood.
Also,
Thank
the
you.
annual report of the foundation, too. Okay, are there any public comments on any of the consent agenda items?
We have one card on 1E.
And that's it?
That's it.
Okay, may we have a motion for approval of items 1A, B, C, D, and D?
Motion to approve
Not E, sir.
1A, B, C, D.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, let's go to the comment. You have one comment card on item 1E,
We have T. Guerra.
okay? Good evening.
Do I have to use this? Oh. So I'm speaking on the donation of $20,000 to the LAPD's LGBTQ outreach team. And I'll start by naming that I'm a transgender person. My pronouns are they and them. I'm naming this in this space because this is not a space that acknowledges or respects anyone outside the gender binary. And that in itself, that erasure, is a form of violence, and we have to acknowledge that and be very clear about that. Policing is by its nature anti-LGBTQIA, because what policing supports is adherence to the gender binary and to heterosexuality. Policing supports toxic masculinity and gender violence, all of which are counter to the very existence of folks who are non-binary, gay, queer, or trans. Policing is also anti-Black and anti-immigrant and ableist and anti-poor folks. And I raise all of this because for the LAPD to have an LGBTQ outreach team and to accept donations for that team and to put stickers on police stations indicating that they are safe havens for folks who feel at risk of experiencing hate crimes or feeling threatened is to ignore the very nature of policing itself. I name that policing is anti-Black, and we've seen that already from your LGBTQ outreach team. And it's no coincidence that this outreach was initiated in Hollywood, which is over 50% white. Your LGBTQ resource list advises folks who are feeling threatened with a hate crime to call 911, completely ignoring the fact that if a Black person calls 911, there is a very real risk that the police officer will show up and kill them. So how are you accepting funding for this outreach team without understanding how LAPD inflicts violence on the LGBTQ community, and specifically on Black folks and folks of color who are non-binary, queer, and trans? This outreach is a sham, and this money needs to be rejected.
Thank you for your opinions. Do we have any other, are there no other public comments on 1E?
We have no other comment cards,
Do
sir.
we have a motion for approval to accept 1E?
Motion to approve 1E.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, approved. Let's go to item number 2A. My report regarding the recommendation for board action is to approve the commission liaison and assignments. We provide, these are assignments that are effective immediately, about 15 or 16 different maybe even more, areas where two commissioners can engage without Brown Act violations. So there are specific commissioners assigned to the specific areas. All the commissioners have signed off, I think, knowing which ones you're on. I think each of us are on 3 or 4. Do we have any questions by commissioners?
Nope.
On any of these? Okay. Do we have any public comments on item number 2A?
We have none, sir.
Okay, a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Let's go to item 2B. Item 2B regarding the fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget. And I would like Mr. Teefank to explain what the process has, he's not going to go into the budget, but what the process has been for the commission liaisons, and what the commission does with the budget. The budget is a city council budget. It is not a police commission budget. Mr. Teefank.
Yes, Mr. President, I'll be very brief and then turn it over to the department budget team to fill in the blanks. The mayor submits to all the department general managers on an annual basis directions for them to prepare and submit a budget for the department for the upcoming fiscal year. The department has done that. They'll present that budget to the commission tonight and have discussion with that. That document begins the budget process. The work that the commission does with the liaisons, in this case it would be President Sobroff and Vice President Decker, is meet with the budget team, which they did last week, review the priorities of the budget, discuss those priorities, make any recommendations for adjustments in those priorities, and then it comes before the entire commission. The commission's role tonight is to review the budget and then give the department the authority to submit it to the mayor's office. Once it is submitted to the mayor's office, that begins the process with the chief administrative officer and the mayor's office to begin developing a budget that will be submitted by the mayor to the council. So the document before you tonight is basically a working copy of the department's request submitted to the mayor, but the mayor's budget will be that budget that is submitted to city council. Its first stop is to the Budget and Finance Committee, where they will hear all of the city department's budgets, and from that make recommendations, adjustments, and then ultimately recommend a budget to the full city council. City council then will discuss ultimately making a motion to adopt a budget, and then it's presented to the mayor for signature. That's a very brief overview from a 1,000-foot level of the process, and I'm sure Ms. Sauer and Chief Peters could answer any other questions they might have.
And before that, Chief, are there any comments? I mean, you're intimately involved in coordinating this.
No, good evening, Commissioners. I believe that this budget is reflective of the department's priorities and the correspondence that was included on the front part, laying out the summary as far as areas that we want to see particular focus of the budget. I think it's responsive to our strategic plan and our priorities, and I look forward to your support, as well as any questions relative to particular areas that draw your interest or concern.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Test. We on? Anybody know how to turn on the mic?
Where's the technician at?
Test. Test.
There you go.
Are we on? Hello.
Doesn't sound like you're on, John. Where is he at?
He was right there.
Test. 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 Test.
You're not on.
Testing.
You want to just use the podium behind you?
Just take the mic off of that, John.
It's taped on here, so a little awkward, but that's okay. We adapt and overcome. So good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Peters. I am the Acting Director of the Office of Support Services, and I'm joined here this evening with Ms. Anne Marie Sauer, who is our Commanding Officer for our Fiscal Operations Division. I've been in this position for about 2 weeks now and have learned a lot in terms of the budget. I'm not going to propose to be an expert, but I've been mentored and tutored well by Anne Marie, and so I'll allow her to answer the questions that come up. But to reiterate what the chief had indicated, that we believe that this budget is consistent with the strategic plan, the chief's goals, and those of the mayor that he set forth for us moving forward.
Good evening. Anne Marie Sauer with the Fiscal Operations Division. I'm going to jump right into the priorities that we've included in the budget based on the background you've been provided. So our priorities for the 1920 fiscal year include the following. Our personnel resources are essential. As such, we're requesting funding for Civilianization Phase 1, which redeploys 38 positions in 2019-20 and approximately 200 positions over 5 years. So we've included positions in our Department Operations Center and ComStat. We've also focused on identifying operational efficiencies. That's okay.
I'll lend you my mic.
Return to home base.
Thanks. All right. So we also focused on identifying operational efficiencies that would return officers to the field faster. So that includes opening the Harbor Jail and also implementing our drop-and-go program at 3 of the jails, which significantly reduces booking times. The homeless initiatives were a top priority for the mayor, and we have basically deployed 54 sworn officers to the city's homeless initiatives, whether it's our HOPE teams, the Unified Homeless Response Center, or the Homeless Coordinator's Office. And this has had a significant impact on our patrol operations. So we're requesting funding for these positions so we can replenish patrol resources in the Office of Operations and fill the positions that have been taken from the various areas for homeless initiatives. You all are familiar with managed attrition, so the department will have returned 550 sworn personnel to the field come January 2019. So if we're approved for the funding to backfill these positions, that will have a very positive impact on operations. We are also requesting funding for sworn overtime for our Bridge Home facilities. As you all know, the first one opened at El Pueblo. So we're requesting sworn overtime funding in the amount of $23 million to support our deployments on a 24/7 basis at the various Bridge Home facilities. So we anticipate one in each of the council districts, and that's obviously had an impact on our resources. Along the lines of sworn overtime, in addition to the Bridge Home, we're requesting $43.5 million based on our usage over the last 2 fiscal years. For our sworn and civilian hiring plans, we're requesting to continue to hire to attrition, and that's separate from the positions that we've already discussed. So the sworn hiring, and then along those lines, we've also requested $1 million for targeted recruitment funding for our efforts that we've started in the current year so that we can continue that. On the civilian hiring front, as I mentioned, we have requested a hire to attrition. We have 600 fewer civilian positions than 10 years ago. Our civilian workforce is the backbone of the organization, and it's critical that these positions are filled, especially as we continue to redeploy our sworn resources from administrative functions. We are requesting 20 new civilian positions to address the workload associated with new legislation relative to the California Public Records Act requests having to do with reviewing, redacting, and releasing records, as this is going to be a significant lift to the department starting in January 2019. I think you all know technology is also critical. So in addition to private funding that the department is seeking over the next few years through the capital campaign, we will continue to use the annual city budget process to seek funding earmarked for existing LAPD projects, programs, and ongoing support. Along those lines, the records management system continues to be our top priority, as well as requests for technology enhancements and upgrades of obsolete systems, including video security systems in the jail, as well as contractual obligations. Our fleet is also key to our daily operations. We're requesting 186 vehicles, which is consistent with a multi-year plan developed by the mayor and CAO, which includes our black and whites, motors, slick top, and in addition, 25 new EV leases for a total of 260 electric vehicles. We're also requesting funding for parts, since that's an area where we continue to be underfunded, and as we continue to keep our vehicles longer, that has a significant impact to our parts account. Through the city's MICLA program, which is essentially the city's credit card, we're requesting 123 specialized and undercover vehicles, and we're also requesting 1 replacement helicopter. If all requests were approved, this would bring our total 1920 budget to $1.85 million, and that includes the MICLA vehicles as well as the helicopter and alterations and improvements funding. At this point, we're happy to take any questions you have.
Commissioner questions?
I do.
Sure, Commissioner Decker?
I have a number of questions, but I'm happy to yield the floor to any other commissioner if they
Maybe
so
you'll ask half mine.
desire. You've already answered a number of them, so thank you. And by the way, having worked in the mayor's office previously and been on the receiving end of getting department budgets, I know how much work goes into it, how much work will continue to go into it. So thank you very much for all the efforts you and your team are putting into it.
Thank you.
And I should say these questions aren't necessarily geared at you two. Perhaps, Chief, you may want to jump in because some of these are about how the budget addresses your priorities as chief. But I'll start off with, I noticed the mayor's budget letter asked for every department in the city to present a budget that addresses, according to this letter, at least 2 things, which is stepping up efforts to reduce homelessness and reducing risk and liability. And I wonder if you can go into a little more detail on the efforts regarding assisting people who are experiencing homelessness, particularly the patrol issue, because I've heard a lot of issues from the community about their concern on that. And so I just want to be sure we have an opportunity to explain what that is.
Yes.
And secondly, reducing risk and liability, which was the other ask of the mayor in the budget. If you can explain how those 2 issues are being addressed.
Happy to. So first, let's talk about the homelessness issue. As a department, an early partner in the mayor's initiatives to impact this humanitarian crisis of our generation, homelessness, the department began transferring patrol resources, men and women that were typically assigned to a black and white, to make up the HOPE team, as well as the Unified Homeless Response Center, a point of coordination for knitting together all the city and county resources towards the most pressing problems as they occur across the city. As the resources that are in this budget are personnel resources that are meant to restore staffing back in patrol, because we have already advanced these more than 50 personnel to this specialized non-patrol related function. So it's a problem-solving effort. It's an effort that these HOPE teams provide for the safety of LA Sanitation, for LASA workers and other outreach workers as they're working not in an enforcement role, but an engagement so as to try to find avenues for people experiencing homelessness to obtain services and housing. So this is a backfill, if you will, to restore the public regular typical staffing of what would otherwise be in a patrol unit. The critical need for that is that we have seen a substantial increase in radio call volume and in workload of our patrol workforce, which is resulting in officers feeling more burnt out, experiencing more time out of the field, handling administrative tasks and responsibilities associated with those radio calls, and lengthening response times to urgent and routine calls. For example, a year ago, the average response time 2 years ago would be about 32 minutes to a routine call for service. That call time today is 58 minutes on average. So this is an effort to add resources back to the field because we need those resources on the front line. Additionally, the department has already, as previously stated, realigned as of January in 2019, 550 personnel to field duties from specialized positions and administrative positions. In addition to that, we have had additional civilian hirings, which has resulted in allowing us to return some sworn personnel that were in civilian positions back to the field. This budget also addresses that by adding civilian positions. But for the homelessness issue, lastly, with bridge housing being established, the first site being El Pueblo, the in support of the mayor and in support of the Unified Cities Initiative on this, we are providing a safety net of additional uniform patrols around that location to ensure the safety of both the people that are using those facilities and that supportive structure, as well as the immediate community around. As we move across the city, I attended a council meeting, or a town hall meeting with Councilwoman Nuri Martinez last Wednesday night in the Valley, and a pressing matter was, if bridge housing is established in my neighborhood, what can I expect? And what the mayor has committed to in his State of the City address back in May or April was that you can expect added sanitation services and added police services. This today is being done by added officers working around the clock around Pueblo. What this budget envisions is a similar scenario for all 15 council districts utilizing overtime. Now, I will say that this is a wireframe of a rough estimate of what it will take to add those added services. Because as we move from neighborhood to neighborhood, I'm not convinced, we're learning as we go, that it will necessarily take 2 officers 24/7, 365 at a Bridge House location. For instance, and I'm trying to fill this with examples of why this is that position, we're opening a facility in Hollywood, and that site is not going to require those added policing services because of the nature of the site. But yet, as we open up other locations, envision, for instance, the MTA parking lot in Venice, we would see added patrol services. So I believe that this budget is responsive.
Chief, why Hollywood not and why Venice yes?
The nature of the Hollywood site, the former YMCA site, is the nature. It's believed that we'll not see the added need for those added police services there. So we'll look and examine that, because the people that are going there are not coming from that immediate area. The people who will find housing at the Hollywood site are being drawn from various neighborhoods, whereas El Pueblo's site was the immediate blocks around that area. So it's not a traditional bridge housing site. What we're trying to ensure is a zone, if you will, of security, of added visible police presence to reassure the public that these locations will be in addition to a neighborhood that will not jeopardize their safety, but will in fact add to their safety, as it gives people an opportunity to have housing and not be required to live on the street.
But do you think that the added presence of uniformed patrol officers might discourage people who are homeless to agree to go to bridge housing? Has that been looked at?
Yes, so we've studied this and worked very closely with LAHSA and with our other city and county partners, that the outreach by LAHSA workers in the months in advance of the opening of El Pueblo did not involve this added police presence. And in the first 30 days after the opening involved, again, a soft opening where we were not in those patrols. Today, we're managing each week radio calls, any instances of violence, any instances of crime. I'm happy to report that those numbers are coming back zeros each week. And the officers that we're putting there, we're identifying as specially trained and officers that are selected, not just a randomized basis, so that they're there in a problem-solving and productive manner. So the individuals that we're also seeing that remain in the neighborhood, there are those who are still on the street that are not taking advantage of the services, that are still frequenting those neighborhoods. But they're doing so in a manner that is not creating violence, not creating additional crime in the area. So I think to date, it's been successful. And again, as we're projecting a budget that won't take effect until July of next year, for the following year, for the next 12 months, I think it's wise for us to identify for the city this type of potential burden that the city may need to withstand. Today, each one of these sites runs about $1.5 million in overtime. I do not have permanent staffing that could be realigned. That's what these HOPE officers have already done. We've already done the 50+ of those. Those that would say, well, you should use this from existing staffing, ignore the call load and the workload that our existing patrol resources already are enduring. And lastly, I'll say that I think that this is appropriately should be viewed as supplemental services and not baseline services. Now, let me transition, if I might, to risk and liability. I'll draw your attention to a line item for the Pepperdine dispute resolution training. I think it's $385,000?
373.
373, I'm sorry, I was off on that. So 373,000, that is something that has been supported each year by the generosity of the Police Foundation. And each year we have seen where men and women, first, second line supervisors, as well as command and staff officers attend a multi-day training that goes to dealing with inner workplace conflict and how to effectively preempt matters from escalating and getting into civil liability for workplace liability. And this is basically the he said, she said, and the conflict that can work and develop and emerge from small workplaces and large workplaces, and how to train and develop supervisors and leaders to off-ramp those conversations and not allowing them to escalate without having to resort to the department's disciplinary system. I attended that training prior to my appointment. I'm a huge supporter of it. Each year we have continued to support it. It's time now for the city to fund that as it's existing, from its existing resources, I believe, as a responsible means of further reducing our liability. And what is quoted in the report is this 20% reduction in risk management liability claims for employment worksite liability. So I think that is responsive to that.
You brought up the Police Foundation, and just to pick up on Commissioner Bonner's earlier comment and some other comments the public has made at different police commission meetings, the issue of donations comes up periodically, and priorities of the department that are not funded in the general fund. And do you have a brief bit of history on that, on why that is and why so many donations are accepted, either through the Police Foundation or through other generous donors? Because in this instance, you're trying to get something that previously was supported by the Police Foundation for this mediation and training, and now you're trying to get it in the general fund. So
yes. So, well, unfortunately, this is a scenario that the city we're a significant draw on the city's budget. The cost and expense of a police department, we recognize what a burden that we already provide. And yet, we also recognize that there are many unmet needs. Many of these requests that you even see in this budget, we expect or suspect that not all will be met. There's a number of items in here that we'll have to try to find, if the city cannot find a way to fund it, foundation or philanthropic resources that would be willing to step up and fill the gap. That is the reality of the city and the budget life that we live. And it's one that I take ownership over. And realistically, in speaking with, for instance, Councilman Krikorian, the chair of Budget and Finance, we have talked about our effort to modernize our technology. And both he as well as Councilman Bloomingfield are interested in finding a way in which to do that. Each year, we have asked for funding to modernize our record management system. Last year, we asked for $4 million, and there was no money that was available. So that was an unfunded modernization update. That is yet again, that was not the first year of that request. We were able to go and find an Office of Traffic Safety grant from the state of California that was able to fund, I believe, $1 million. That gave us some ability to modernize a portion, specifically our traffic reports, begin that process. So this is a budget process that I believe is responsible for us as a business system to budget responsibly, that the budget should represent our strategies as it does the mayor's priorities, recognizing that some may not be met, and if not, then for us to try to find alternatives from other sources that may meet this. As was identified in the budget letter, for instance, the federal government has been a source of year after year of substantial funding. However, we have seen a reduction in those funding levels, and we're projecting that we're going to see a further reduction in those funding levels. And that concerns us because, again, it gives us less flexibility to meet a number of these needs.
Chief, you bring up technology, and by the way, again, for my fellow commissioners, if you want to interrupt me and ask questions, I'll yield the floor to you at any time. I do want to acknowledge that the commission did receive a letter today from Mr. Khan, who I didn't see here earlier, but...
He's here.
Sorry, Mr. Khan. And I just want to acknowledge we received it, where he expresses concern about the growing use of technology by the department, expanding the data-driven policing, predictive policing, body cameras, things like that. I would ask, Chief, if you could address why the materials requested, or the technology requested in the proposed budget here, why you believe all of this is necessary. I note that there's cameras, there's some maintenance, there's some new technologies, upgrading.
Okay, absolutely. So let me start with the record management system of a $3.6 million request. This is to modernize a system that origin goes back to the early 90s on a mainframe application, woefully obsolete and out of date. The city ITA has warned or cautioned the department that continued support on a mainframe application, which is where all of our record management sits, may end at some point in the future. Efficiency-wise, it's costing millions of dollars each year to maintain that mainframe, and is not the most modern use of today's technology as far as how to conduct a record management system. Secondarily, that record management system was origined in a time when the modern way of taking a report was to type that report up. Today, we believe that there's many more efficient systems that you can take and complete a report function, 400,000 of them a year, in a more automated and streamlined fashion, which will save officers countless hours of time. So that modernization, I believe, is money well spent. The workstation life cycle replacement, the department has estimates of 8,000 workstations, of which, 5,000 to 8,000 workstations, of the average age is about 5 to 8 years old. So obsolete workstations, if you were to think about it, a desktop that you have in your home that was made in, that you purchased in 2012 or 13, its ability to take and work modern applications. Our ability today, and where this is impacting us severely, is that these were machines that never envisioned body-worn video. And so the downloading of digital evidence, we collect 14,000 digital clips a day with body-worn video. And officers are required to view that video, and oftentimes will try to view that video on a desktop, and it will crash the desktop because the desktop did not have the horsepower, if you will, because of its age and it's obsolete. So this is an effort to modernize. This request was requested last year as well, and it met with it was not able to find support. So in other words, the department was not given any funding for that. The same with the mobile digital computer life cycle replacement. Those MDCs were created, I believe, in 2012. And so we are trading some of them out, but we're purchasing typical desktops, staging them in a car that was not meant for a mobile environment. So this is a modernization that will update that. The Palantir project support at 1.9, I'm aware of the letter. Last year, that request was actually higher. The request for Palantir support last year was in excess of $3 million. So this is actually a smaller request. Last year, that request was not met and it was not funded. The department has been able to maintain the Palantir project support on our dashboard, our ability to look at where crime is occurring and how it has occurred this week versus last, and historical and trend analysis. We've been able to do that by realigning savings of monies from various accounts. This is an effort to program that in a more systematic way. Each of the network security, this is what it takes to run a computer network. The FBI has recently changed the threat picture of the United States from terrorism to cyber terrorism. And the cyber threat to America today is actually the #1 threat from foreign and domestic matters. And so network security for us is critical so that we not have the network taken down. Server lifecycle replacement, these are all end-of-life processes that have been deferred year after year. Moving on.
And I think you've covered these.
Okay.
And you'd be happy to know in some of your answers, you've already covered other of my questions,
Okay.
unless you think this is going to go on forever. You talked significantly about crime reduction and response times, and I think that those are critically important. I sense my colleague wants to ask a question, so I'll...
Are you leaving the evidence-based policing and technology?
Why don't you ask?
Yeah, no, the question there was also a suggestion that there had been a request for the OIG to review some of these programs. I just wanted to know, one, if that's accurate, and if so, what is the status of that review, and how does it relate, if at all, to the request?
So the department is very much working with the Inspector General as well as the Executive Director, and looks forward to continuing our conversation relative to our data-driven policing strategies, specifically predictive policing and the LASER program. And how these technology requests interrelate with those is, while Palantir is a portion of that helps inform us where crime is occurring and gives us a historical perspective, and also projects where we can see each week historically what our violent crime levels have been and where those crimes have occurred in the city. So there is an interconnection there. We are meeting currently with the Office of the Inspector General on what was previously known as a chronic offender bulletin, to refashion it to be responsive to some of the criticisms and concerns as to how that formula of that bulletin came about, and what notice to people who are identified through that formula, what notice is made, and what awareness they have. So the interplay here is that you have a pending presentation back to this commission by the Office of the Inspector General and by the department that will, I believe, fill in some of the blanks about the work that's been done in the last 3 months. And I would certainly welcome any conversation or comment by the Inspector General, which is really who this commission is tasked with being responsive.
Yep. If you could, particularly if you could address just more specifically exactly what you're looking at, and also the timing of any comments you might have for the commission.
Certainly. So again, it's Mark Smith, Inspector General. This commission directed the Office of Inspector General to look at a number of areas of data-driven and evidence-based policing after the July 24th meeting that was referenced in the letter, which I'm also aware of. The request encompassed a number of things in terms of the cost-benefit analysis of these programs. Was there disparate treatment as a result of these programs? And if so, what was the nature of that treatment? What was the value of these programs? Was it helping reduce crime? And if so, what were the metrics associated with that? How much information about these programs is being shared with the public and should be shared with the public? And a few other questions. I did read the letter that was referenced earlier from Mr. Khan. Just on speaking on behalf of the Inspector General's office, we found the presentation put forth by Stop Anti-LAPD Spying on July 24th raised some very important and substantial questions that we thought were certainly worthy of a deeper look. We also found that the report produced by them prior to that July meeting and the cover letter submitted by them to our office also raised similar questions that were important and substantial. In the weeks since that, we have begun researching the department's implementation of both PredPol and LASER. As the Chief just mentioned to you, we've had a series of meetings that have focused more specifically on changes to the chronic offender bulletin program. The most recent of those was just earlier today, and we have more communication with the department arranged and set up to go through some of the concerns we had with that program. We are also working on reviewing suspicious activity reports. When I came to the OIG, I think there was a bit of a drought, so to speak, a pause in reviewing those, and I said let's resume that and go back and look at any years that we had not previously looked at and get ourselves current in looking at suspicious activity reports. So each one of those areas is currently in progress. What the Commission asked us to do originally when looking at all of these programs together, and I have to be honest with you, it's a substantial ask, in my opinion, an important one, but one that can't be done overnight, and we weren't interested in doing it sort of in a rushed manner. They asked us to come back with a report, I believe it was in mid-January. They picked a date that I think was not actually a commission date, so we'll find the nearest commission date, but mid-January. We believe we're on target to meet that. It's going to be a close call. We've got a lot of work on our end to do. We're sort of doubling down our efforts now and trying to get there, but we're aiming for that mid-January to get a report back to you on those topics.
I just wanted to mention there was a little bit of back and forth there. The discussion we were having was that we're not necessarily here to review the entire scope of your review. That's not an agendized, or that's not an item on the agenda, so we wanted to make sure that our questions were received in the context of the technology requests that are included in the budget and the degree to which they may be subject to some of your, the review that you've undertaken. So.
Well, and I think a related question, and this will go back to you, Chief, to kind of bring the technology issues together with a line item in the budget, in addition to the technology items, is compliance with the California Public Records Act.
Yes.
And what the state passed a new law that I know the department is gearing up to address it, which will allow for more transparency by not just LAPD, but many police departments in the state. I assume that's related to technology as well, but could you address the efforts the department will be making with respect to that line item in your proposed budget?
Yes, so it's priority number 5, and it's detailed with the 20 personnel that will be needed to work force investigation, internal affairs group, and legal affairs group. In essence, the legislature passed 2 bills, one which takes effect in January of 2019 and one that takes effect in July of 2019. The first, taking effect in January of this year, provides for the public to make records requests of all officer-involved shootings, the entire and complete investigation, as well as sustained serious acts of misconduct against personnel, where the department... So the department is currently reviewing how it will go about to collect those files and reports. We have responsibilities due to various confidentiality laws to ensure that there's certain redactation that's done of victims' information and so forth. And we want to ensure that we are prepared to be timely in providing this information. This is forward-looking, recognizing that it's too late in this current budget season to provide for these personnel, but we're building basically a function within our legal affairs, our internal affairs, and our force investigation, because those are the 3 areas that will be needed to be responsive to produce these documents. The 20 personnel here will have to be augmented by technology that allows us to actually copy and produce the digital evidence that's associated with these record requests. So there is an overlap or interplay there with technology.
Okay.
I had a couple.
Are you finished?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm just getting started.
Okay.
Just kidding. So I wanted to go up just back higher level first. The budget was presented, and the summary references the budget requests that are in order of priority. And in my mind, I can kind of, guess what that might entail if you have 3 priorities in terms of how you set the priorities or how you order them. Can you speak to when you've got this longer list? I think when I'm looking at those that are not in the reimbursable category, I think there's a total of 21. What was the process for, and first, is it really to be taken as literally as it's written on the paper that what's a number 1, the obligatory salaries and expenses are a higher priority than, say, number 7, and that's a higher priority than number 20? If that's the intent, can you just speak a little bit to the process for setting those priorities?
Well, it's meant to be responsive to the framework in which the department's been given by the mayor and by the mayor's budget team. And I do believe that it conforms by, first of all, the matters of the homeless initiatives, the technology to improve efficiencies, and to ensure that we have sufficient civilian personnel so we can maximize the number of sworn personnel that are working and available for the field.
What I'm asking is was this senior management, kind of
I'm
command
sorry.
staff that
Okay.
met periodically and actually all fed in and deliberated and set priorities, or how did they set?
I'm sorry. So the budget process actually began about 4 months ago, and there's a budget letter, and that letter is then distributed via a meeting with all of the budget personnel in every command. There is a budget assigned to somebody, so really sought-after position, as you might imagine. But they're told and they're given some instructions as to not to ask for the moon, is to recognize look at our strategic plan, look at what our priorities are, and identify what existing programs must be maintained, and what new or emerging challenges there are, and what, from a budgetary standpoint, would the request look like. Areas that, for instance, then submit a budget request that is reviewed by the chain of command, ultimately myself. And they're rated as essential, highly essential, desirable, and there's a rating process. For instance, the air support, there is 1 helicopter that has been requested. I believe the command asked for 3 or 4 helicopters. And there was just no ability, given all the demands on this budget, for us to sustain, and I could not support that as a top priority. However, looking at the age of the fleet and the critical nature of air support's operations, I was supportive of a request for one airship. There are a number of requests that were not met, that did not manifest themselves on this document. Those would be things for personnel, as well as furnishings and capital improvements to department facilities and equipment. For instance, what we are looking at on our vehicle request is we manage what is called a out-of-service rate. That out-of-service rate now, I believe, is 12%. And at 14 to 15%, we actually brown out, meaning that we have officers who are unable to work the field because there's not enough vehicles, there's not a vehicle waiting for them or available for them to actually go out and get into. So this is a year that we're asking for this number of units, this number of vehicles, in projecting that to keep that out-of-service rate at 12 to 13%. If we could lower that rate below 10%, it would allow us to further optimize the fleet and reduce service costs. So there's a balancing act of recognizing what can the city afford in a department that drives a lot of vehicle miles, and what must it provide. So there's a constant balancing act. What happens is, so the command looks at it, the bureau looks at it, the office director, such as Chief Peters and Chief Arcos and Chief Grimala and Mr. Alicon, and then as a senior team, the budget, Anne Marie Sauer, Ms. Sauer brings everyone's collective wisdom, presents it to me, and I've got somewhat of a line item veto capability. Again, I'll say, for instance, the multimodal community service was not one that survived the process, but I feel it's critical as we do community engagement that we understand what the community feels like and how the community is viewing us. And I think that as a line item, that it's money well spent for us to take a look back and ask the people in which we serve, how are we doing? So then that's where that item gets back in the budget, where something else may fall out.
But you're making the final call.
Absolutely. This is my budget, but it is a commitment. But also, if I might clarify, this is also this commission's budget. And as the head of this department, I look and ask and will seek your support with the council and with the mayor and with the city family to petition for these resources. So if there's resources here that you believe are ill-chosen or less priority, that's where I welcome those conversations.
Which is a process that Commissioner Decker and I went through collectively, but again, only 2 of us can do that.
Right.
We did add some thoughts to some of the priorities, and I think a couple were shifted as a result. Yeah.
I don't know if it's part of the process, but it might be appropriate to going forward to have a mid-year or some earlier check-in where there is an opportunity for the commission to start to get a little more familiar with the line items and comment on any close calls or areas of particular priority?
I think that's a good idea. I mean, we could look at the priorities as presented today, and then 6 months from now, look at where they sit, what was approved, what wasn't approved, how priorities have changed in preparation for the next year. I think that's a good idea.
I'd also welcome, we provide a financial status report that we're responsive to each quarter, and the department is charged with going to Budget and Finance and the full council to petition for either added funds or shifting of resources, depending on how the current budget rolls out. And your involvement with that is also, I think, is important.
I think I'd say that the process starts in 8 months anew again, okay?
Right, we start in July, long before we have the mayor's budget policy letter, just because
Okay, so
it's
I
a
would
big
say that
effort.
if we could deal with it in, a month or two before that, just to get a status and see if there's any thoughts or ideas, would be helpful.
Okay, just a couple other quick ones. A couple of questions about overtime, and let me just throw out 3 questions, and then you can address them in any order, however they relate. The most specific one is about, you referenced the bridge housing overtime costs, and the question just is, are any of those reimbursable or otherwise recaptured from any sources?
So
Let me just get the other 2 out, and then you can, so that was one specific question. The other 2 was, it's my understanding, just on the briefing that I've had so far, that there is something you might refer to as a structural deficit in the overtime category, something to the tune of 53 or 50-something $50 million. And so I wanted to understand how that's reflected in either what's requested or not requested in the budget. And then thirdly, with regard to overtime, I recall that there was a task force of some kind that was established to review how this was being managed and what some of the options were. So I was just wondering what the status was of that and whether it is being done on a track separate and apart from the budget request, or whether it's fed into or informed this request in any way.
So let me start with the last one first. And so the task force that we're joined with the CAO as well as the CLA, mayor's representatives, we are continuing to meet, and there's expected to be a report from them, from this task force, identifying potential strategies or recommendations. I believe it's in the next 30 days.
It's about 45, so
Okay.
we're looking at probably the beginning of the calendar year.
So it is my belief that I'm looking forward to, as we've invited the CAO and others to look under the hood as to how we're actually using overtime and to see how that's been used by other agencies and to benchmark our use and outcomes. I don't anticipate a lot of, at this point we're optimistic, but I don't know that, but we're not banking that we're going to suddenly find $10 million worth of savings by any strategy the CAO is going to identify. The nature of the shortfall is being addressed this year by, on priority number 1A, the $43.5 million in overtime is being added to the $80 million that we were provided last year, and that is meant to cover that deficit. And what I mean by that deficit is that our effort is to compensate employees as they work an hour of overtime with cash compensation in lieu of time. If I give an officer compensatory time, I must let that officer take that time off. And given our staffing constraints, I'd much rather pay as I go and pay for overtime as it occurs. I know the city is also desirous of that. So with that said, as we've showed the task force, historically we've used these levels of overtime. For instance, this year we set aside $5 million for extraordinary events, such as fires. And so you see the use of overtime to augment staffing and patrol, because we have to deal with evacuation areas and so forth. There is that rhythm and flow of overtime usage that is non-reimbursed, that to the scale of about 1.2 million, 1.3 million hours of overtime that we should budget for on a cash and carry basis. So that's what we've been doing. It's restated again this year, probably more explicitly, so that we can avoid the current scenario which we're in. The current scenario that we're in, we will be forced to move into compensatory time as soon as February of this next year coming up, because of the shortage of the funding of all the cash on the onset.
But that would be a result of the 18-19
Yes.
budget. So what I'm asking, or one of the questions was, if you get all or some part of what you're asking here, does that put you in the same situation
No,
next
it would
year?
eliminate that. It would allow-
Entirely?
Yes. Yes, it would eliminate entirely. This would fund us at a projected level of our average use of overtime for the last 2 years. And so, and this is where it's important, is holiday pay, standby pay, those are 2 areas that are taken from overtime that is entirely predictable. The holidays are provided for by MOA, as is standby pay, and they constitute $12 million?
For next year, we're projecting 18 million. I think it's about 16 this year.
16, okay. So those are right off the top. So you really lose flexibility as far as what's reimbursable, that you can say, well, I can cut down this activity by 5% and save $10 million. There's not, those type of activities don't readily exist with the manner in which the department uses overtime. Last issue on this is, and this is not meant to cry foul with this, but this is an organization that on an overtime basis has historically been very lean and not been over-reliant. Many police agencies and public safety agencies use overtime to backfill for training, to backfill for individuals that are sick or injured on duty. And the Los Angeles Police Department does not. There have been proposals by the league and others that we should. And instantaneously, that would be a $70 to $80 million increase in overtime costs if we were to do that type of backfill. So we have removed a lot of discretion from nearly all the discretion, I'll say, except for critical investigations. And that is where, for instance, Saturday night, so Saturday night when Metro officers were fired upon and resources responded to conduct that investigation and continue that investigation, there are overtime monies that are in play there. And the discretion could be to stymie or shorten those investigations. And at this point, I believe that we use overtime efficiently, but yet we need to support those type of critical investigations.
And these numbers are net of MTA, correct?
Yes, and then let me just finish the bridge housing reimbursement. Currently, we're working with the CAO and with the city to determine if there are any funding sources for issues of homelessness that could be used to fund added police services that we've talked about. To date, we've not yet identified that.
Fair enough. And I just had one last question about, this one's about the $39,000 request for the implicit bias training.
Yes. Dr. Marks?
Yeah, what I didn't pick up from the discussion of that was, there was a good discussion of the merits of the request and what it's intended to do, but I didn't see a discussion about how going forward we'll be measuring the impact of that training. Is there any discussion as yet as to?
Well, there has been some discussion, Commissioner, about a pre and post survey, doing some type. We have surveyed participants in the aftermath of it to evaluate the course. John, I don't know if you're prepared to talk about that further. I don't mean to kick the can here, but
he's exactly right on in terms of what we've done with that, and we looked at that. We identified the first time around exactly what it was in terms of the rating score, and then the participants had the opportunity to provide written comments, and we did a report where we categorized all those, and that would be the same type of a metric that we would use going forward. This particular program initially was utilized to train the entire department, and where we are at now, we're providing it in our police sciences and leadership training, so that when those officers that graduate the academy and they come back 11 months or within an 11-month time period, they will be getting what everybody else has got relative to the training.
Is the $39,000 only for that smaller leadership
correct.
training?
That's correct. So he's doing 13 sessions at $3,000 apiece, but that's for a one-year contract.
And in response to the commission, the department has resources internally that can provide this training. However, we also recognize that Dr. Marks brings a particular special and effective skill set The commission was particularly interested previously in ensuring that we continue in our engagement with him. Previously, that monies for that staffing has come from non-budgetary resources, such as a foundation, and so we're trying to, again, program these into department budgets so that they're supported, and so that a reliance on foundations and other sources of funding that may or may not be stable, so we don't jeopardize such critical programs.
Yeah, and I agree with and support that. I think that's all the more reason that going forward, you'll want to have, the justification can be stronger if we also have a good discussion of what we know about the effectiveness of the program, particularly over time. I think right now we've had a good, somewhat anecdotal, for lack of a better word, but we've had a good kind of one-time look at it. But I think that we want to build some longer-term program around ongoing effectiveness.
And I agree. However, I will caution.
Cost money?
No. Everything costs money. But no, the implicit bias. In fact, Dr. Marks will tell you the shelf life of his training is about 2 weeks. This is an area of study or police science development that has not clearly been laid out as far as what are the measures. You get an instant measure by the participant, but how do you measure the lasting impact, if any? And in fact, his own training, he'll say, I give you no warranty beyond the half-life of this being 2 weeks.
I can imagine, I'd agree with that, but I think it's also why I wouldn't want us to settle into a mentality that thinks that we're doing something potentially better than we are. In other words, we'll feel good because we're doing it, and we'll feel good because we believe that it's effective. But if the shelf life is 2 weeks, it could be that we're just doing something that's good for a couple of weeks, but not over effective over a longer period of time.
I think what's going to be critical I know what's critical in this is I'm very thankful under Chief Peters' leadership, under Dr. Pinnell's leadership, is they're integrating implicit bias and bias, the theories of bias in through all of our areas of instruction. So that, because it is much like integrity. It is not an integrity course. It is a value that has to permeate everything that we say and do. And I'm proud of their work. However, I do believe that he offers, as an individual, from an outsider's perspective, a certain street cred that is a breath of fresh air or a different view that's not law enforcement that gives people some pop. And what's hard to measure, though, is 5 years from now, will people remember his name or maybe they'll remember an image. We're still working out those measures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any public comments on item 2B?
Yes, sir, we have 15 cards. Begin with Adam Smith, T. Guerra, and Hamid Khan.
Mr. Smith?
Roll. Let truth come in the building now.
Should I stand at the podium or the mic?
Well, probably should get it back.
He's going to move the mic for you, sir. We had to do an adjustment there.
Can I move this thing up?
Okay.
You checking Twitter, Steve?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
You checking Twitter?
No, I'm checking the time, Mr. Smith, and yours has started.
Ooh, burn. At the data-driven, evidence-based hearing held by this commission in July, both the LAPD and the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition made presentations. Ironically, the coalition was the only one of the two that actually used statistics as part of their presentation. These were the LAPD's own numbers, your own statistics, and they show that these programs, PredPol and LASER, are nothing more than a continuation of history of a class and race-based system of policing. As mentioned tonight in August, this commission requested an audit of these programs from the Inspector General's office. You always use the phrase community policing. In fact, Steve used it earlier on Twitter today to describe tonight's meeting. For you all to talk about community policing and then come here and be voting on a proposal to dump millions more into these racist policies when the IG's office has yet to do these audits is ridiculous. Speaking of community policing, on the proposal there's $3 million more for body cams and $8.2 million for dash cams. Every study out there shows what we all know, that all the body cams in the world won't change what officers do, and actually just serve as another piece of the way that the LAPD surveils. Policing is inherently racist and violent, and cameras don't change that systemic behavior. Also, $8.2 million for dash cams, Steve? In June of last year, when Harbor Division officers Ramirez and Urrutia shot, killed, and ran over Eric Rivera with their out-of-control car, they didn't have their dash cam on, and that killing was ruled in policy. Why would we need to spend $8.2 million on unused equipment? Also, in 2013, 92 of 300 vehicles in South Bureau had their dash cams tampered with by officers, something that Soboroff kept from the public. The president of this oversight commission kept from us. Was that community policing?
T. Guerra.
Thanks for your opinions. Next.
These are facts, Steve.
Go ahead. Sir, you're going to get a chance to speak.
Please.
And when you speak,
Let this young person talk.
will you let
Please,
the person
please,
talk?
let this young person talk.
I'll tell you.
Please, let this young person talk. Thank you.
Do I have your attention now?
Yeah, well, but I'm giving you
So
a
no.
warning.
Okay. So
I'm
do I
giving
have
you
your
a
attention
warning.
yet?
Sir, go ahead.
Talk about a hostile fucking space, right? This is your community meeting.
Wow.
This is your community meeting. I hope everyone in here who has never been down to an LA Police Commission meeting at headquarters sees that this is the type of atmosphere that this commission supports. This is the way they police people in this space, the same way people are policed outside this space. So when we talk about community safety and healthy and prosperous communities, we have to acknowledge that police do not keep us safe. With this budget, the LAPD seeks to expand Operation Laser and predictive policing. These are programs that criminalize entire communities. With Operation Laser, the LAPD compiles a list of folks in the community that they refer to and that they decide are the worst of the worst. That's what they call them in their documentation, the worst of the worst. And the majority of these folks are youth, by the way. And then they go after these folks using bulletins and often using Metro officers utilizing Palantir in unmarked cars. In 2016, the year that LAPD opened the Community Safety Operations Center for South Bureau, gang enforcement officers killed 8 folks, all under the age of 36 years old, in a 5-month period from May to October in 2016. They killed Robert Diaz, 28 years old, Keith Bursey, 31 years old, Omar Gonzalez, 36 years old. And then the same officer, 12 days later, killed Jesse Romero, 14 years old. Gang enforcement officers killed Richard Risher, 18 years old, in the Nickerson Gardens. They fired over 50 shots at him as he ran away from them. Carnell Snow was 18 years old. 1 day later, gang enforcement officer killed Daniel Perez. He was 16 years old. So all of these were killed by gang enforcement officers over a very specific time frame following the expansion of Operation Laser in 2016.
Next speaker, please.
Hamid Khan, please.
Come back during public comment. Next
You don't
speaker.
know the answer to that.
Next speaker, please.
You're going to continue funding these programs.
We're going to have a next speaker.
You don't know the answer to that.
Will you come back during public comment?
Targeting the community.
Please, come back
Do
during.
your job.
Okay, now I'm going to give you a warning. Your time is up.
Stamp them and before you approve them. Do your fucking job.
The next speaker, please, Hamid Khan, Michael Williams, Jed Perriott, and Jamie Garcia.
Mr. Khan.
So I think the message that we sent to the commission, Eileen Decker and Dale Bonner, was that under what pretext are you going to be approving this budget when your own body back on August 14th called for the investigation and a thorough audit of Predpol, laser, suspicious activity reporting, and various other data-driven evidence-based policing programs. We thoroughly presented on July 24th that how these programs are racist. We provided you with data where the black community by the LAPD is being impacted 6-to-1 as a result of these programs. We gave you evidence that the algorithm that is being used in Predpol is nothing but an earthquake predicting model. We gave you evidence that the creator of Predpol, Jeff Ranthingam, compares hunter-gatherers in their decision to hunt wildebeest and gazelles to somebody who's going to steal a Honda or a Lexus. We gave you evidence that Craig Uchida, who created Laser Program, calls people tumors in the black community that need to be removed like laser-like precision. And here you are sitting. We gave you clear evidence of that. We did a whole presentation. The whole world saw that. And you know what? When I say that, people from Spain came and looked at that thing. People at The Economist covered that thing. People from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation covered that. So the whole world is watching. And under what pretext are you going to be approving millions of dollars of money for Palantir, a CIA-created program that is at the heart of all of these programs? So that is the question to you, that you are sitting here presiding over, and you're going to be approving a $1.8 billion budget, which is a 10% increase, and this is not even the unrestricted money that the LAPD is going to get. This is not even the federal grants that the LAPD is going to get. This is the money that is directly targeting the community right around USC, right around in this neighborhood. This is where they do drive-bys. This is where Craig Uchida was doing drive-bys. We have evidence of that. We have evidence of that how CNAP, the city nuisance abatement program, is being used to evict people.
Next speaker, please.
Michael Williams, please.
Okay, you can come back during public comment and finish your comments.
How can you even
Thanks.
think in the right mind that you're going to grant this body
Next speaker, please.
causing people tumors in the community? That is your test. This is the first thing.
I'm going to talk really fast because I got a lot to say, and you only give me 2 minutes, you'll cut me right off because this is very community friendly. First of all, your budget doesn't make sense because you actually allocate, you tell you want $22 million for this home bridge and other programs when you just said, that your chief of police just said that there has been 0 calls or necessities for police officers to be in those areas. So how are you proposing to give $22 million to something that has no use? They don't need them. You just said there was 0 calls for violence or robbery in those areas that you just talked about. So why do we need $22 million in order from the budget to be allocated to the police? Wouldn't that be better to allocate that $22 to making better facilities, to having more rooms, to making more facilities? Wouldn't that be more adequate than wasting time on something that you don't need? Then you also talk about, you also made statements about laser, which is, again, I'm just going to back what they just said. They already told you that this thing is racist. Like, they've been told you that this thing is racist. They target black people inherently, and you're still wanting to fund and put money into this program. It makes 0 sense. The next thing is you should talk about computers and cars, right? You need more computers and cars. How about you allocate some of the money that you use for things like aerial assault training and actually, like, put that into your computers and cars if you need more computers and cars, instead of asking for more money. You facilitate combat training, militaristic combat training, that costs thousands, if not millions of dollars, that you could be using to put into your own resources. And instead of militarizing your police department in order to militarize this city, you should be giving that money to yourselves to get new computers or something. Makes more sense. Your budget makes 0 sense, and you should be rejecting it because you don't have to, it's nonsense. Like, your budget is literally nonsense.
Jed Perriott.
Reject this budget. Reject this budget. It is absurd that you would approve a budget that includes millions of dollars for Palantir before the Inspector General has completed his audit. It's ridiculous. And as many of the speakers have noted, these programs like Predpol and LASER, which, by the way, for folks who don't know, LASER stands for Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration. That's colonialism. That's gentrification. That's the displacement and banishment of communities from areas like USC for the intention of clearing the way for things like the Olympics, clearing the way for wealthier, wider residents at the expense of entire communities that have been here for decades, entire cultures that have been built. It is also used to displace and to target immigrant communities through ICE. And let's talk about your shelters, the Bridge Home Shelter and El Pueblo in particular. I'll have you know that I and many community members for the past month have been there every day monitoring your police. Every day, we're right there with them. And I have no idea what they're doing there. I have no idea what their purpose is. 6 police officers standing around while sanitation and LASA tell an elderly woman she should take her tent down. They stand around looking at their iPhone, talking about the Dodgers, and then occasionally puffing their chest because someone's not taking their tent down fast enough. LASA agrees with us that police have no business in homeless engagement. They even agree, and you'll find in their report that's going to come out that they will make a similar request, that police do not belong in homeless engagement. They do not belong in El Pueblo, and it is really scary. Again, once again, as I mentioned with Laser, that the mayor is doing this really because rich white people want him to have police, as you mentioned, Chief Moore. It's rich white people who say, I don't want a shelter unless you give us more cops because we're scared of homeless people. Go to El Pueblo and talk to the elderly men and women living there who don't even have opportunities to get a shelter bed because there aren't enough at the Bridge Shelter. There isn't enough permanent housing. They're signing up, they're there, your police are there to harass, intimidate, and ultimately banish once again to make way for rich people where apartments are going up right around the area, apartments for wealthy people.
Next speaker, please.
Jamie Garcia, followed by Jeremy Levinson.
So we're going from 1.6 to 1.8 billion. So, going through the report, I had to, Control F and search things because the report's 760 pages long. But on page 80, it speaks about transparency. And the co-opting of the work of the community is just inherent of LAPD, because in that statement, under transparency, you speak about the partnership with the commission to bring forward issues about data-driven, evidence-based policing. You were not even speaking the language. It was the community that was coming forward and speaking the language, raising the issues, talking about Laser, talking about PredPol, talking about data-driven, evidence-based policing, because these programs have been here for 10 years. Nobody had any intention of letting us know that you have a hit list of people. You have chronic offenders that we are seeing now through the Canadian Broadcasting Company that, yes, they are very young. And their points are very low, Michael Moore. They're very low. They have no business being on the list and being tracked and traced by you. And as Tiffany stated, you're killing them. So our goal here isn't transparency. We don't want to know more about these programs because we're learning on our own through the public records request, trying to find out more about these programs. Our goal is to demonstrate its intent to cause harm. Whether it's Operation Hammer or Operation Laser, the intent is to remove us from communities. Operation Hammer was very obvious. Bulldoze homes, get people out of communities. But here you have a sanitized process. A process where you collect and you map communities. Because all these FI cards that you fill out, that you use Palantir to, fish through, are mapping communities. You're mapping communities, and we know you use social network analysis through the CSOCs that you created particularly to target this neighborhood, that you had an opportunity to tell people about that you never did when you deployed all those Metro Police. You could have mentioned in that LA Times article that there were chronic offenders, that there was a CSOC, but you didn't.
Okay, next speaker, please.
The next speaker, Jeremy Levinson, followed by Laura Smith and Andrew Hall.
Check the budget.
Hi, I'm here with my colleague. Another one of our colleagues spoke to you last July. We're speaking as UCLA anthropologists. We are here to express our concerns about the proposed budget that includes funding for the data-driven police programs, such as Palantir. As anthropologists, we have very serious concerns about the theory, the methods, and the ethics of the anthropological research on which many of these data-driven programs are based. We are also very concerned about the serious harms, specifically racial and economic harms, that such research-driven programs may cause. So we really strongly urge you to withhold all funding for data-driven programs until the audit is complete, and we'll have a lot more to say at that time on behalf of the UCLA Anthropology Department.
Thank you, sir.
Laura Smith.
As the chief of police said a few minutes ago, this is also the commission's budget. And if there are resources that you believe are ill-chosen, he explicitly expressed that it's your responsibility and imperative to say something and stand up and do something about it. This is that opportunity. You can and should reject this budget tonight. The community has clearly brought forth very legitimate concerns regarding items that are part of this budget, including the predictive policing programs. And as the Inspector General said earlier this evening, in his words, they have begun researching implementation and are currently in the process of reviewing. That doesn't sound like, and he didn't say in any way, that any findings have been arrived at. And he said that there's a lot of work to do to even meet that deadline in January. It is completely irresponsible to approve any funding for the continuation of these programs, which there is a lot of evidence to show how racist and harmful these are to the community, without the completion of this audit that was specifically requested by this body. There is no reason to approve this today, given these concerns, especially given that, as the Chief of Police said, this is the Commission's budget.
Next speaker.
The next speaker, Andrew Hall, followed by Ashley Gibbons, Mario De Leon, and Kayo Tsumi.
I'm here in solidarity with everyone who's spoken before me, and I'm speaking primarily tonight from my experience as an educator. It's not uncommon for teachers to remark that they've been taught much by their students, but it's particularly true for me when it comes to the subject of policing. I learn almost every week from my students, nearly exclusively kids of color from poor and heavily policed communities, about the police, about who the police protect and who they serve. They're burdened not just with homework and the challenges of navigating adolescence, but with court dates for minor nonviolent offenses, with parole officers and drug testing, with parents behind bars, with parents whose criminal records make finding housing and employment exponentially more difficult. They've taught me the function of police is first and foremost to protect and to serve the ruling class. Many have lost friends and relatives to police violence, and it's shattered them. Tonight, the Commission takes up the question of whether to approve this proposed budget, a budget that asks for a 10% increase in funding in a single year, a 10% increase in what is already a $1.6 billion budget that eats up more than half of our city's unrestricted revenues. We don't need a 10% increase in LEPD funding, we need a decrease. We need to decrease funding each and every year and redirect it to affordable housing, to health services, to public transit, to after-school programs, and I urge this Commission to reject the department's proposed budget and demand one in its place that, by way of reducing policing, prioritizes the supportive services that our communities need.
Thank you.
I echo tonight's call to reject the budget for the LAPD. It includes this massive expansion of predictive policing without the audit the IG clearly is in the middle of and has expressed its concern about. We can't let the LAPD to continue to expand their budget while the citizens demand an end to these predictive policing programs, which is just a veneer for the continuation of racist and classist policing across LA and the county. Crime is a social construct, it's not geology or geography. In addition, homelessness isn't now and has never been helped or supported by policing. And rejecting this budget and moving the funds to the community that has been most impacted with homelessness is our call from the community.
Thank you.
Mario De Leon, followed by Kayo Tsumi and Melina Abdullah.
I didn't get,
1 second.
just a small point about it. I don't know that we got the last couple of speakers, like who they were and what their affiliation was, so we could just make sure that we get getting
You want
that.
to come back up and give your name and affiliation? Which ones?
I want to know where this gentleman teaches.
The last three were Laura Smith.
You know, it's their choice. It's helpful. It's helpful to understand it.
give your name if
Yeah,
you
so it's just it's not required.
Oh, okay, they're on the cards. Okay, that's fine.
That's fine.
If anyone didn't catch it, my name is Andrew Hall. I'm here with the Democratic Socialists of America as well.
You care to say?
Where do you teach, sir?
At a high school in Pasadena.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mario. I'm with Collective of Free Radicals and also in support of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. In the future, I want to be a teacher, specifically math and science. And I come to this meeting because I'm really disappointed in how science and math is being used and manipulated in order to feed into really methods and policies that I don't agree and I don't think deserve to be in our communities. And just to echo everything that some of my colleagues have said, it sounds like you are not listening, so I was just there and I kind of wrote a small poem. Maybe it helps if it rhymes for it to make sense to you. My teachers taught me to learn some hard skills. I'm trying to tell them science kills. LAPD is telling me science is subjective. Yeah, I guess it's cool, but don't take me for a fool. My life is not just an algorithm. I've got a heart with an upbeat rhythm. You've been killing us with bullets and tasers. Now you're asking us for Predpo and laser. I demand you to reject this in future police budgets. Do your duties. We'll be back.
Thank you.
I totally oppose the LAPD's budget increase from $1.66 billion to $1.8 billion. Doesn't sound like much, but it's an increase of $140 million. That's just an increase besides the huge LAPD budget that sucks most of the LA city's fund, so that there's not enough funds for homeless, other human rights, healthcare, and a lot of needed programs. LAPD has too much money, and now you want $140 million more. No. And I totally oppose raising LAPD's budget for predictive policing and Operation Laser. Predictive policing predicts black and brown communities and people as criminals. Laser, quote, targets with laser-like precision repeat offenders, unquote, on a point basis. They accumulate people. How many points if someone has a tattoo that you want to criminalize? How many points if someone wears the baggy pants that you want to criminalize? How many points? You know, it's mostly black and brown. I bet you would never predict somebody like the Marine Corps veteran that shot up Thousand Oaks and killed 11 people. You know, the police went and his mother was afraid of him. Somebody called the police, but they did nothing. And they left him to go and murder 11 people. Okay? So no more money for LAPD. In fact, you need to decrease your budget.
Melina Abdullah, followed by Reverend Nat Turner.
I didn't hear what you said.
Melina Abdullah, followed by Reverend Nat Turner, James Thomas, and Eugene.
Okay, Professor?
And that's it, sir.
So I just want to echo this call to reject the budget, but we also know that you won't because you rubber stamp everything that's put before you, right? So we want to encourage Dale Bonner and Eileen Decker, who are relatively new to the commission, to do your own research, to understand that what they tell you is in their own interests. But we are the community. I live right around the corner from here. My children attended preschool here. Right? And so we're in this because we believe in the safety of our community. For those of you who are new, they're going to lie to you, especially Steve Soberoff. He's a professional liar. That's why he's the president of the police commission. He's told my students that we're lying when we say that LAPD gobbles up 53% of the city's general fund. I want to encourage you to do your own research. Go to cao.lacity.org, look at the pie chart that the city produced itself, and see what the $1.6 billion represents. It's 52.8%, rounded up to 53% of the city's general fund. So what does $1.8 billion equate to? What could we be doing with that? What else could we be funding? More parks. Did you have a hard time parking here? Right? Maybe we could have more public parking structures. Maybe we could have more after-school programs. I also want to know if that report on the proposed $1.8 billion includes the internal budget, where we understand that over 70 sworn officers do nothing but PR. PR that's used to commit character assassination on the people that LAPD kills. People like Albert Ramon Dorsey, who you tried to paint as a homeless person who grabbed someone's gun when really he was a gym member who was simply showering in 24-hour fitness on October 29th, had the police called on him because he was big and black, and y'all killed him with 4 shots to the back. Do your research. Whose side do you stand on? We stand on the side of Albert Ramon Dorsey. Say his name. Albert Ramon Dorsey. Say his name. Albert Ramon Dorsey. Say his name. Albert Ramon Dorsey.
The next speaker, Reverend Nat Turner.
And then who?
James Thomas, and then Eugene.
Okay. Sir.
There was a call for credentials to go out. And I know you all don't care about black people. Our skin doesn't really matter to you. So hopefully our credentials won't get us killed as we leave here today. I'm a United States Army veteran. You know that man you were telling to leave, who's also celebrating Veterans Day on yesterday? Who had to look at the Facebook post of some of my friends talk about their battle buddies that they lost in the war on terror, right? I'm also a professor teaching alongside this great woman, Melina Abdullah at Cal State, LA. I'm also a minister of the gospel. And I want to inject some theology into this moment. Because this is a Christ moment. Do y'all know what got Jesus arrested? It was Rome's budget. 30 pieces of silver. That's all it took into the hands of one man. And so the police commission has a decision today to make. Either you're going to be Judas or you're going to be Justice. Because Judas took the money. Justice would reject the money. And so this commission has got, and Steve Soberoff, I think you ought to listen. Because as a real estate millionaire who has no real interest in buying to poor folks, you don't, who has no real interest in buying to black people, right? You're right. Jesus had to tell a story to a rich man. You know that, right? He had to let a rich man know, even though you may give your crumbs to the poor, you have to give your integrity to Christ. You got to give your morality to Christ. And what's happening right now with $1.6 billion is not integrity, nor is it morality, but it's injustice, and it's bullshit, and it's nothing but cow manure. And y'all got to figure out how can can this money be situated to feed and to build up and sustain a community?
Okay, next speaker, please.
LA should be leading. Hello, somebody. Hello. Should be leading.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is
And
James
what
Thomas.
our moral community should be. Is that right?
Thank you, sir.
Because the budget got Jesus killed.
Thank you, sir.
And it was the community that got him up out of the grave. And that's why we here today to stand with those who these motherfuckers kept shooting. to
Sir,
keep giving the
thank you.
families
Next
and
speaker,
their
please. You
loved
can
ones
come
a
back
name
during public comment and say
keep
whatever you
lifting
want
up
to say.
their name.
Next speaker.
And Steve Sobel,
James Thomas.
ain't not a
Next
damn
speaker.
thing that you can do about it.
Thank you. Who do we have?
James Thomas, followed by Eugene.
Mr. Thomas.
All right, preacher.
Well, since you already had the sermon. All right. So you guys are going to take the minutes off when I introduce who I am, right? Yeah. Thank you. Well, I'm a preacher too, but I'm not going to preach. But I do want to say, I decided to look, you know, I remember this commission when the late President John Mack, when he was on this board. And at that particular time, it seemed to be reflective or more reflective of the community. And so I decided to go back and just to see what your charge is. And this is what you say. You say the commissioner's concerns are reflective of the community at large, and their priorities include implementing recommended reforms, improving service to the public by the department, reducing crime and the fear of crime, and initiating and implementing and supporting policing programs. That's what you say you are supposed to do. My spirit is grieved because a commission that was once the mouthpiece of the community is continues to allow what we've seen, which is the persecution of people who care about people who are being killed without cause. The other thing that I want to say, since we're talking about data, and I got my doctorate across the street at USC, and in urban affairs and public policy, so I know a little bit of something about data and how data is used. And so I also want to say is that if you are so certain that these algorithms are able to predict corruption and crime, then use the same very algorithms in your ranks to root out those officers who are the bad seed that gives policing a bad name. And so unless you are willing to use those same algorithms and those same metrics on your own, then you should not use them on us. You should not use them on us. And so I'm asking you, if there of humanity and concern, I'm pleading with you. Don't pass this budget. Listen to the people that you are supposed to represent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And the final card on this item, Eugene.
Right. My name is Eugene Pesikov. I'm a member of DSA and also work with Ground Game and an accomplice to several organizations, including Black Lives Matter, COSECHA, but I'm going to get to my point. It seems like every good argument has been raised regarding why this budget shouldn't be passed. And my only, I guess, question is, once again, Sobroff, because it doesn't seem pertinent or relevant to speak to anybody else. It seems like this commission follows your lead. And as a fellow Ashkenazi Jew, I would like for you to consider what you are doing by going along with this police commission, or not police commission rather, but this police department, which upholds white supremacy. And I understand, I understand that you have a profit motive in order to uphold this system, but I am asking you to think of the people. I understand that you are scoffing at this idea, but I'm sure even your son and everybody here who has already made a solid argument for why this commission or why this budget should be rejected. Everybody here who constantly comes up to you and constantly comes here and makes their case for why a police officer should be investigated, and yet time and time again you turn a blind eye to that and uphold a system which has historically oppressed even fellow Jews, which has oppressed black people, indigenous people, and yet you uphold this system because you profit off of this system. And I am asking you to find your heart and to realize that the city of Los Angeles is burning right now, and that fire is going to come and engulf all people of wealth if you don't do something about this, and you don't do something about this now. This is biblical what is happening now. It's no surprise that what these fires started after the election, after the rich chose Proposition 10, where the rich chose not to allow rent control. So, bro, I understand that you're going to laugh at this or not laugh at this, but ignore this. I am telling you,
Next speaker, please. Thank
for the
you.
love of God, do the right thing.
We have no other speakers on this item, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Do the right thing, Sobra. Do the right thing, Sobra, and for once in your life, just listen
Sir,
to the
thanks.
people.
You can come back during public comment and give the rest of your
Listen to your
speech.
son. Just do the right
Here's
thing.
the public comment.
Oh, do we have any other comments?
No, sir.
Do we have a motion to approve the department's report and transmit to the mayor?
Can I, just a brief comment?
Sure.
Before we, I do think that, in a city of 4 million people, you need a strong police department, and I'm prepared to vote to put the budget forward. I think it'd be irresponsible not to. But I do note that we've heard a lot of questions and concerns raised here today. Some of them I share in the sense, mainly as someone who's come here seeing and hearing much of this for the first time. So I'm not prepared to stand in the way of course, of funding the department, but I am for, as we discussed at the beginning of the budget discussion, would appreciate a discussion about how we can all be a little or much more aware and engaged with what comprises the budget, so that we can digest it. 700-something pages 3 days before a meeting, I think, is a little bit difficult to deal with. So hopefully we can do a better job next year.
Okay. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the budget.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, let's go to the next item, please. Okay, so we're on item number 3 from the South Bureau. I'd like to ask Commander Nolte. Okay, so I'm going to ask that there not be any more disruption, or we'll have to move on. Okay, so we're on item number 3. City Attorney? Okay, got it. So, I'm going to ask for order. If we don't have order, these people who say they are the community, who are not the community, are going to cause the meeting to be over. Okay, motion? What? We are unable to continue this meeting because of the disruption of the few people. Have a motion for adjournment? Move adjournment. Second. Meeting's adjourned.